Nowadays, you can't turn on a single sporting event without being bombarded with gambling ads during every commercial break. While at first gambling was illegal nationwide, and one would risk being called a degenerate for their excessive gambling habits, gambling has become woven into the fabric of everyday life and is marketed to you at every turn. A recent AI YouTube ad has users able to place bets on the length of the government shutdown via the advertiser's app. Since the powers that be recognized that selling gambling to the masses will be extremely profitable, they have since stepped out of the way of companies like Underdog, PrizePicks, MGM, etc., to reap some of the benefits of this gambling explosion. However, while fans are seemingly interacting with their favorite sports more than ever, there has also been an increase in skepticism as to the legitimacy of professional sports, as the incentive has switched to airing the perfect game to now maximizing the amount of profit that can be made on the game. With the biggest stars in America's premier sports leagues, the MLB, NBA, and NFL, all being under investigation for placing bets on games, how will the future of sports continue to be impacted, and how will gambling's hold on major sports affect the ethicality of those sports? Recently, several NBA players were arrested for allegedly being involved in a major gambling scandal that threatened to undermine the integrity of the league. Miami Heat role player Terry Rozier was arrested for providing a friend with insider information about his performance in a March 2023 game, which the friend then sold to other bettors, while former player turned coach Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones were also arrested in connection with involvement with the Italian mob in rigged poker games, with James too being named in a separate indictment concerning illegal sports betting. This comes after Pablo Torre broke news of alleged under-the-table dealings from the Los Angeles Clippers in their contract negotiations with star player Kawhi Leonard. These scandals continuously leaking out of the NBA make fans question the integrity of the sport as a whole and raise questions about Adam Silver's leadership. Silver has made several good decisions in his time as commissioner, like the removal of Donald Sterling, the insertion of the NBA Cup into the regular season to maintain interest during the NBA's long regular season. For example, even months after it had been leaked that Kawhi was paid under the table by the Clippers, Silver has yet to give a punishment to the team. It is hard to penalize a player who already load manages half the season anyway, but this is starkly contrasted by his predecessor, David Stern's handling of the situation. When presented with a similar situation of a team, in this case the Minnesota Timberwolves, paying a player under the table, Stern stripped the Timberwolves of 5 first-round draft picks, fining the franchise $3.5 million, voided Smith's contract, and suspended owner Glenn Taylor for a year. This sentence sent a clear message that Stern would not tolerate any attempts to manipulate the salary cap or undermine the league's competitive balance. Several NBA players have went on to mention how strict Stern was and how his discipline also saved them from themselves. While the NBA has been noted for several scandals in the past, as common for any sports league, it can also ironically draw interest in the league. However, nowadays in the NBA, there seems to be a new scandal unfolding practically every week. Back in 1985, a theory began circulating that would go on to haunt the NBA for decades, the so-called frozen envelope conspiracy. According to legend, the league rigged the draft lottery to make sure Georgetown star and future Hall of Famer Patrick Ewing ended up in New York. The story goes Commissioner David Stern knew which envelope belonged to the Knicks, and it had been sealed beforehand, just enough for him to feel the difference when he reached in. Whether true or not, that single moment has become one of the most talked about conspiracies in sports history. The legitimacy of the NBA draft is still in question, as just recently the Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis trade rocked the sports world, as from a GM's perspective, trading one of the best young players in the league and a perennial MVP candidate for an aging, injury-prone veteran in Anthony Davis makes absolutely no sense. But when the NBA draft lottery came around, it all started making sense. These scandals compiled on top of each other, as well as the limited penalties placed on unruly players, currently seen with Ja Morant, prove that the NBA is losing its grasp of control they once had prior to the advent of the internet. Adding gambling on top of that is a recipe for disaster, and a league where many fans claim that they are tired of it anyway. And several changes to the format in the All-Star game, as stars seemingly show a lack of effort. But the good is contrasted out by the leagues constantly being involved in scandals that call into question the authenticity. Gambling has always been prominent in the league. When NBA's greatest star suddenly retired in 1993, despite his insistence that he was simply tired, many suspected that his gambling habits had gotten so out of hand, David Stern needed to sit him down, even at the detriment to the popularity of his own league. In the early 2000s, it was revealed that prior to games, several of the NBA's refs would conspire against certain players, ensuring that they wouldn't get fouls called in their favor, or they would call excessive technical fouls on certain players, even for the slightest of offenses. And if that wasn't enough, the league's integrity took another hit in the early 2000s when it was revealed that NBA referee Tim Donaghy had bet on games he officiated and even conspired with gamblers to influence outcomes. Donaghy's scandal rocked the NBA to its core, calling into question not just the actions of one referee, but the credibility of officiating across the entire league. Together, these incidents form a troubling pattern, one that could permanently damage the goodwill the NBA has established with its fans for decades. If fans can't trust the product they're seeing on the floor is legitimate, why even bother placing thousands of dollars on gambling apps that they're shoving down their throats? In this modern age of widespread gambling, the NBA isn't the only league that's come under scrutiny for their gambling allegations. Arguably, the greatest baseball player of all time, Shohei Ohtani, was accused of being involved with an illegal gambling operation earlier this year. While Ohtani himself was later cleared of any wrongdoing, his long-term interpreter took the fall after reports surfaced he had allegedly stole millions of dollars for him to pay off betting debts. The situation sent shockwaves through the sports world. Football has faced its own share of controversies. In recent years, several NFL players, including stars like Calvin Ridley, were suspended for betting on games, shaking fan confidence and raising questions about the integrity of professional sports in an era where gambling partnerships are now deeply embedded into the leagues themselves. At the end of the day, gambling has gone from being seen as a vice to being marketed as entertainment. And sports leagues have leaned all the way in. What used to be about competition and legacy has turned into an endless chase for clicks, odds, and profit margins. The same leagues that once condemned gambling now promote it at every commercial break, blurring the lines between fan engagement and exploitation. The NBA, like every other major league, is playing a dangerous game. The more they embrace betting, the more they risk their credibility. Because the moment the fans start believing that outcomes are manipulated, that the fix might be in, the product itself loses meaning. It stops being about sports and starts being theater. And that's the irony. The leagues built their empires on authenticity, on the idea that what happens on the field or the court is real. But if scandals like this keep piling up and gambling keeps driving their narrative, the same thing that's making them billions right now could be what destroys the trust they spent generations building.